we'll start off. Hey, I want to welcome everybody in to the November edition of Dynamic Discussions. It is an honor and pleasure to represent Dynamic doing this show, and we've got a great guest tonight, Travis Smash. If you haven't heard of him, you're going to know a little bit about him tonight. World champion powerlifter and we're going to talk about this, who loved weightlifting and wound up being a world champion powerlifter. We'll talk about that story. Travis is got a podcast, The Barbell Life, that Dynamic is happily sponsoring.
Thank you.
Travis, I've known Travis, I was dating this back, but I think the first time I met Travis was 2000 at Keith Payne's House of Pain Gym in Yankton, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Travis was just getting ready to make the move with his training partner and longtime friend, Ox Mason. And then it took a few years later, but then doing a professional development talk, we caught up again in, I think, 2005 at the 365 gym in Mocksville.
That's right. Yeah.
Got some good looking towns we've been in.
Yeah.
And then we really got close when I got back to the Panthers, and I lived in Clemens right down the road from Travis's facility. Yep. And Travis actually was my son Peter's strength coach. I was living in Charlotte and Peter was based out of Clemens, and Travis took him through that block zero period and level one. And Travis has a lot of great things that Travis did for him, helped Peter excel when
Peter's killing it.
When no one believed in him as an athlete, and he wound up having a pretty good career. So Travis and I go back professionally and personally, and I'm excited to have you. Thanks, Travis, for coming on.
Thanks for having me on, Coach. I'm excited always. Should be some good talk.
Yeah. So what we're going to do
these dudes here, we got some good people here.
We do have some questions we'll get to, but what we're going to do tonight is first, let's just do this. We're going to break it in part one. Part one is the Swiss conference. And I don't know if a lot of you know this, but the Swiss conference has been going on for at least, as far as I know, the early 2000s. And it generally was been held in Canada, hosted by, I think it's Kenn. Is that how you pronounce his name?
That's
and there's been some heavy hitters, and it always happened during football season, and I never could get there. Well, sure enough, I couldn't get there this year, disappointed. But sure enough, it was in the United States this year, and Travis got to speak. If you haven't heard of Swiss, look it up. There is some of the best things that ever have occurred at this conference, man. And I remember, if you follow me and you've seen me present, you always hear me talk about absorb, modify, and apply. And that's where I got it. I got it from a Swiss conference review by Dave Tate on TMAG, back when Dave was writing for TMAG. And one of the subtitles was absorb, modify, and apply. And that's what I recommend everybody tonight think about when Travis is talking about some of the things in training. Just, hey, man, take it all in, see how it fits your program, apply it. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, just chalk it up to another failed experiment in training athletes.
Right.
But so tell us a little bit. First of all, was it well attended? And then tell us how it was set up, and then just a little bit of what your thoughts were overall.
Well, the guests they brought in were awesome. And so I don't know why it was like this, but the minute I got there, people were engaged. I walked in and like Ed Cohn immediately come up to me and brought some people that were wanting to meet me. And the whole time, like I was a short timer because I'm so busy this year. I didn't want to be away from my kids. It's Halloween. So I went up there on Friday, came back on Saturday, but we were, after we did our presentation, it was Brian Mann and I talked together. We were up till 4 a.m. with people asking us questions. It was really a different feel than I was used to, where, people were wanting to learn. It was awesome. I don't know how they developed a culture like that, but they sure did. It was great.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how that thing has grown. And really, to be honest with you, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems it's not very well promoted. It's like a cult following. It's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like out there like you see all these other ones. Now, it was this year more because I think Dave had a lot to do with hosting it, and Elite it looked like they were the major sponsor and promoter of it.
I think so.
But generally, and I think some of you guys who've seen it, that's the most I've ever seen it promoted. Usually it's like, oh, the Swiss conference was this weekend. Really? I didn't know. And then you hear about all the great talks.
I have idea, they should definitely like involve like the people that are speaking, like do more of an affiliate approach, I promoted it, but like obviously I would be more apt to promote it if like there was skin in the game there. But
Oh yeah.
so I think that, they just haven't gotten to that point, but that's where they should go. Because you get people like me, Ed Cohn, people with big followings, affiliate would be the way to go, I think.
Well, I would just say this. I hope to go next year if it's in the States.
I will.
I would really like to do that, especially if it's in Ohio, because you can make a really good professional development trip with Ohio State being in that area. Dave, Matt Wenning. I mean,
Yes.
there's some cool stuff to get done there.
Amazing. And they're just to like give you guys like a heads up. Here's what I learned this weekend. I feel that in the I think we'd all agree in the last like decade, you got GPS has been a thing, velocity has been a thing, all this athlete monitoring. I think the next move the industry is going to make would be testing, because there was like a new company. They're talking about, blood, urine, feces, hair. I think that's going to be the next big push. Obviously, my buddies Andy Galpin, they had the Rapid Health, but there's a new one coming out. And so now there'll be some competition, which will be good for us. It'll bring the price down a little bit. So,
well, I'll tell you this too, when you say testing, and Yox is going to start laughing when I tell you this, just some basic stuff. When we were at Tactical, this company just launched a hydration product that you put into like your urinal. And you know how right now a lot of coaches are just putting up the Gatorade bottle. If your urine looks like this color, drink one Gatorade.
Sure.
This was able to measure your urine and give you a red, yellow, or green light right there as you urinated. They're working on a female one, but
in the
bowl. It's in the bowl. So
lit right up right there.
So, by the time everybody figured out what it was, you got people running around. I was green, I was red, and you got dudes slugging water left and right.
Got a bunch of meatheads running around trying to see who's hydrated. It was hilarious.
But you're right. But see, to me, that's like ingenious, because
brilliant.
Now it signals more, because like, let's face it, if we're just looking at the color of our urine, we're always going to side on, oh, I'm more hydrated than I really am. But it's hard for you to not see. If it's red, man. You can't deny that, hey, you got to drink some fluids. So I mean, that's just simple testing. And we've been talking about urine and evaluating hydration for how long, especially when we were at Arizona State. We always worried about that. But
sure.
Yeah, I can see that definitely happen. I mean, technology is going to continue to be a huge part of what's going on in all sports, as we've seen what you're doing with weightlifting with the velocity stuff. But yeah, so I think that testing, you might be right based off of what everybody's investing for sure.
Sure.
Right, so
Andy and those guys, one more point on that. Andy and those dudes, I mean, they have all the MMA guys. Almost every one of those top MMA guys are like, they are taking their physiology to the last. I mean, I'm talking cellular level. Like, it's crazy.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I would say this, because they are such a multidiscipline sport, and they have a lot of different unique properties, let's say, they have to train.
Right.
CrossFitters and strongmen are very similar.
Very similar.
Totally. I mean, because it's, the more and more I watch the CrossFitting deal is a different story within itself, but the more and more I'm watching and being around this strongman, especially at the high end level, this is multidisciplined. Like,
totally.
Deadlifting, a deadlift isn't just a deadlift anymore. There's so many variations and so many things that factor into a good deadlift, depending on your levers, depending on the height. And
is it for reps?
Same thing with the press. Pressing a log versus an axle versus a single arm dumbbell. It's crazy to see how this differentiates different people, because
totally,
again, I don't want to single anybody out, but like, I've gotten to know Bobby Thompson, who's the American log press record at like 480 pounds.
Yeah, I saw him.
And he's still, but when you compare that to his single arm dumbbell, it's totally different, because it's a totally different technique. If your hands aren't big enough to grab the circumference of the handle,
it's a wrap.
How the ball, Is it a cylinder or is it a huge sear dumbbell?
Sure.
It's really interesting. And again, I can appreciate being I can't imagine, it's unimaginable how strong they are, but I can appreciate those guys more and more and more, because like anything else, what they're doing, 99.9% of us can't do.
Two sports that I'm, besides weightlifting, the two sports that interest me the most would be strongman and MMA. It's just it's more complex. The energy systems they use is like, it's so infinite what they need.
It's tremendously weird. So let's talk a little bit about you. And I did forget that you are now at Lenore Ryan as the premier collegiate. And well, I'll go to your accolades later, but what you've done at Lenore Ryan in a short time is ridiculous.
Thank you.
All right. So based off of me knowing you and just us chopping it up, you're a guy who, when you came up through the ranks, your real passion was weightlifting.
Yeah, it was.
And you went into App State, you played ball at App State. You had Mike Kent was your strength coach, and
great strength coach.
You told me about, you guys would talk about Olympic lifting and this and that. And then you wind up, because remember back then there was powerlifting was the stepchild. Like,
right.
That's just the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
And then here you go, a weightlifter in your mind who winds up becoming a world champion and one of the strongest men in the world, competing against the likes of Eddie Cohn, the GOAT, and guys like Chuck Vogelpool in different organizations, to circle all the way back, go back into attempting to be a high-level weightlifter, where you trained at the USOC with Wes Barnett being your coach.
Right.
And then you wind up now, and I can say this because it's the truth.
Yeah.
You are one of the tops. I won't say the best, because that's not fair to other people. But let's just say this. There's about 4 or 5 of you who can debate that you're the best weightlifting coach in the United States.
I would say 2 of us.
And I would say, based off of just me knowing about, and I rate this on who you send into nationals, who you send into worlds.
Right.
And I don't necessarily, I understand team wins are important, but in the end, when you go, you're not being able to send Lenore Ryan weightlifting to the Olympics, but you can send one of your athletes, and that's like everything else. And then obviously what you've accomplished over time with the amount of athletes you've had make junior worlds, Pan Ams, and all the international events definitely has to be, in this short period of time, up there in the top 1, 2, or 3.
It's the most by far. No, it's not 1, 2, or 3. It's by far the most.
Well, there you go.
I mean, I'm just calling it like I see it.
I know you're counting, and I thought it was
31.
And I thought it was close to that because of the youth program you had developed.
Right.
So
that's another thing too, is like I developed most of mine start from babies up.
Yeah,
whereas some people just, they'll get somebody at the end of their career and then claim responsibility, which is
that's whatever. A different podcast.
That's a whole different podcast. Yeah.
So tell me, I'm selfish too.
Yeah.
How circle this around? Like, how does a weightlifter mentally become a world champion powerlifter and then find his roots back in the weightlifting? And now what you've done with weightlifting, and we'll talk training here in a little bit, how that all came about, and who were some of the people that gave you the platform to be where you are today?
Man, well, after college, I went straight to Colorado Springs. I before I left my last year of college, I started powerlifting, and I went to the junior nationals, and I won. I went to junior worlds and got silver, but then I loved weightlifting. And so I just, on a whim, drove to Colorado Springs. Think about it now, it's crazy, but it worked out. I got there, I met Wes Barnett. I just talked to him yesterday, and he became my coach. He's a 2-time Olympian. And so he started coaching me. A year later, I got the invite to go to Olympic Training Center. So it was a quick rise in that sport. But then about 1999 or 2000, it was my father was diagnosed with cancer. So I moved. It was terminal. So I was faced with, do I stay here and not talk to my dad on his last days of his life? So I moved home. And as you know, back then, CrossFit wasn't a thing. And so, there wasn't a weightlifting gym on every corner, and I still needed a coach. Like, the thing about weightlifting is, like, you can do it without a coach, but you'll never be good. And so, like, you need a coach and a place to do it. So I decided to go back to powerlifting, and it was right when the WPO was starting. So that was intriguing. So I'm like, Karen Kidder was talking about, maybe making a living as a powerlifter. So obviously that was intriguing. I wanted to see if I could do it. So I started in 2000. I did my first like WPO meet. Well, I did some little meet. Oh, I actually went to Big Iron to do a local regional meet.
Wasn't that in Nebraska?
Nebraska, yeah.
Yeah.
So went there with what's her name? Becca Swanson.
Yeah, and her what was her husband?
Rick Hussey. Rick
Hussey.
Rest in peace. Yeah. So but then I went to the WPO in 2000, and that was awesome. So that was in Orlando, Florida. So I don't think anything has ever been done like that before, because every great powerlifter in the whole world was there. Ed was there. Steve Goggins was there. Wade Hooper from the USAPL boys come over, even though that they were telling them that they were going to get kicked out.
It didn't even Mike Siders, the big super heavyweight,
Brian
Siders.
And you know what's funny? Because people will talk about like WPO squatting high or whatever. He bombed out on depth for his squat, so they can be quiet. And it was amazing, coach. I remember Jesse Kellum, Vogelpool. It was the first time. There was the second time I met Louis Simmons, and I was just, I honestly, when I weighed in, Ed Cohn was there too, and I threw up because I was so nervous, because all these people I've been reading about were there, and it was just surreal. But it went well. My very first meet, I tied Chuck Vogelpool, my very first one, and he won on body weight, but that was the last time he won. So it was good though. But I think though, I look back and I think about powerlifting, weightlifting. The best thing that ever happened to me as a weightlifting coach was going back to powerlifting, because of the culture in powerlifting is so much better. And here's what I mean by that.
We're going to talk about that.
Yes.
We're going to talk more about that, but go ahead.
Yes. Just at Swiss, I was reminded, every powerlifter and powerlifting coach, they'll sit down and tell you everything they're doing, any secret they have. In weightlifting, man, it's like they think they have some ancient Chinese secrets. I'm like, you don't have shit because I'm beating you. So let's talk, but so that culture helped me. It helped me to not be okay with, well, this is the way we've always done it. I hate that, number one. So who cares? Because you're getting beat. At the time, weightlifting was losing. So like what you're doing is not working. So now there's a group that wants to, Spencer Arnold, is one of the Waxman, even Kevin Simons. Like, we want to be the best, we want to win. It's the first time ever since I've been even in weightlifting, where we're talking about winning the Olympics. And so what had to happen was a shift in culture, and it's definitely happening. It's not happened, but we're making a movement. So hopefully people stay focused.
Okay, so let's then walk into that, because that's a good way to roll into some of the training stuff.
Okay.
And I could be wrong, but I try to stay as a kind of on the fringe of knowing what's going on with programming and stuff and all this stuff. And I've talked to Mike Catone about this, and I think he would agree. But what I thought, when I started going over a lot and watching you train your lifters, I thought what I saw you from programming, based off of what I learned about how everybody else trained American weightlifters,
right,
was, and this is where your powerlifting background came out, as well as I think a little bit of your exposure to Louis Simmons and the West Side methods.
Sure.
Is, Louis took a bad rap for saying, American weightlifting's awful. They don't know how to train. And again, I'm not here to debate this or that, because we all know for a long period of time, and this is something I believe too, is American weightlifting overall got very static in their programming.
Right.
It never changed. It was the same thing. It was one thing I could never understand was, you're like limiting maximal strength in accessory work by using percentages of the maximal lifts in the competition. And I never could understand that. And I always remember when Mark Henry came over and then Shane Hammond, and Shane had that dive bomb squat, and
Yeah.
he goes into weightlifting, and everybody's so amazed because he's doing like 750 for fives, and they look like me doing 2 1/4. But I had to remind people that's 75% of his max.
Right.
Like
Right.
he's and he should do that. And people like, in weightlifting, well, if he squats 1,000 pounds, you should be able to clean and jerk, 900, just things like that. So I thought the one thing I thought right away was, and this could be, and again, I'm going to give you credit for this because this is my opinion and what I've seen studying it. I think you helped create a paradigm shift in weightlifting where maximal effort training of accessory lifts showed that you could do that, and it would not only affect your competition lifts in a positive way, it was also building a tremendous amount of confidence and the ability that your kids could strain if they had to as much as they needed to, especially in the squats. Like I thought,
Right.
watching your guys squat and watching your women squat, you could tell right there you weren't going off 120%
No.
clean and jerks.
That's horseshit.
And
Yeah.
and so tell me, am I right? Did your powerlifting background help you be able to feel confident in, let's just say, flipping the switch on the standard programming of weightlifting? Because now, like you said, I think that you had a main premise of that. And I also think that when USA Weightlifting got smart and dissolved the team training and went to these, hey, you coaches train your dudes and
Right.
we'll have these camps. Well, I think that gave the coaches a little bit more to say, well, then I'm not going to train them on the
How you
standard
said.
template. I'm going
Right.
to train them the way I always thought I should train them. And now I
Right.
think and then you got a guy like Mike who's got such a great personality for that role. And then you got Piros to help just tighten some things up.
Right.
But they understand that their real role is to manage the team and
Yes.
let you guys coach your athletes. And
Mike's
we're at,
awesome.
and I mean, and you're just, and it's showing. It's showing in the results. It's showing in the medals. It's showing in the development of these athletes at a high level. And like you said, we're not, we still got a ways to go. But I think we can say we're not a laughing stock anymore when we go to these international meets.
No chance. Definitely on this side of the world, it's official. We're the best team, So now we got to make the move. I feel like worldwide now, the only one I feel like that's ahead of us is China. But I feel like, we want to win. Straight up. I'm not saying we will, but we're definitely acting as if we're trying to win. And, we compete in 6 weeks in Colombia. And, I feel very good that, that Ryan has a dang good chance of winning. But I think the biggest shift is what you're right, is like when I first came in, if I mentioned anything about,
you took a beating.
Beating.
You took beatings.
Yeah, if I talked about bands, they would be like, oh, you don't know anything. Yes. Guess what? Now they're all using bands. So, but that was the culture though, coach, that needed to change.
Know.
It's like you'd have people like, these are great people and they paved a road, but you had John Coffey, and then you had dude who was awesome in Louisiana. You had what's
Kyle
the dude?
Pierce.
Hatch. No, well, Pierce,
Dale
yeah.
Hatch. Yeah.
But Hatch, who turned out hundreds of great strength coaches and great lifters, but they had like the Hatch system, and it never changed. And no matter who you were, you did this system, and obviously that doesn't make sense because what I need is not what you need, is not what the other person. And so that's where we've gone with it, is individuality. There is no mass system. There is, what do you need, Coach Kenn, to get stronger? And I'm going to give it to you. And in a way that's going to make you a better weightlifter, because for some people, all I need to do is max their squat out and guaranteed their clean and jerk and snatch goes up. Some people, like Ryan, there's no point anymore. Doesn't mean I don't still try to up his squat, but I try to up it at 0.4 meters per second, something that I don't have to worry about hurting him, something that doesn't leave him with a lot of, muscular fatigue. So we can spend our time snatching and clean and jerking. So the key is being able to find out what the individual needs, and which makes the coffee and those systems, just outdated at this point because things have moved along, but they were awesome. To be clear, all of those dudes were amazing and they paved the way, but things needed to change. That's all I'm saying.
And that's like anything, right? I mean, that's just evolution and innovation and
Right.
the athlete, the type of athlete changed also. I mean,
Right.
regardless of sport, I would have to say that we'd all agree that any sport you follow, athleticism is at an all-time high. What's
Right.
not is the general physical preparation part
Right.
has decreased because we've gotten into this, specificity at such young ages. But so, well, here's another thing, like you said, about once you get to that point, there could be some diminishing returns. One of your athletes who's now training over at Cal Strength, like look at Nathan Damron. I mean, Nathan was squatting 750 and his numbers were really good, but it seems now that he floats in that low 600s now. And his number now, he's being more effective technically and investing more time there. But again, even if you go off the traditional numbers, his 600s are so much stronger. And he was a front squat machine. Like I would always tell people, Travis's kids are not, if they catch a clean, they're squatting it. I don't know if they're gonna jerking it, but they're gonna squat it.
They're definitely standing up.
Right? Yeah. So the rest is history. But so with that being said, would you say and that your weightlifting template, because there's something there. It's not,
there's a template.
Yeah. Would you consider it's very organic, like the West Side powerlifting template, where here's kind of a structure, but this guy's doing this, this guy's doing that.
Totally.
This woman's doing this. She needs pulls. He needs full reps.
Right.
This guy needs more back squat.
He needs bands.
Yeah.
He doesn't. Totally. And there's a formula for all of that. Like this, like if someone uses bands or not, there's a reason I use them or not. So like, which we can talk about what velocity they should be at. It depends on the person. So the key is like the testing we do, when they first get there doing, the force velocity profile. Shout out Jim Ware, get it, match 5 code. So, but we do that, and then it comes down to, as all of these coaches on here right now, we all are instinctive. We know like this person's slow, this person is really fast out of the bottom, but they don't have really good power. Like like Ryan, my dude, he's incredible. He's the fastest dude in America. He applies force at a higher rate than anybody in weightlifting in America, but he did not have the best when it comes to in the power position, where it means the most. So that was an example of, we started doing bands everything, because the one thing that bands do, like 3 things really. They change where you maximize force. They change it to where if you're straight weight, you're maximizing at the bottom of the squat, because of all that matters, the moment arm. The hip is further from the line of force. But yet when you use bands, now it's harder at lockout, simply because of the accommodating resistance of the band. So it causes you to do force at the top. It also makes you faster because it pulls you, obviously it adds to gravity. Gravity is 9.81 meters per second. Bands, depending on what you use, is on top of that. So when you add that, faster eccentric, you're going to get everything that has to do with slowing someone down or stopping the eccentric contraction, like tighten, the protein filaments tighten, anything that has to do with collagen, tendons, and then the neuromuscular system, like muscle spindles, all those things are emphasized. It makes you faster and more elastic. So it does that. And then overall, it gets you used to producing power or producing force at higher velocities. So some people, if they're just like Tank, my boy, if anybody follows me, this guy Tank is incredibly strong, but he's not very fast. So bands would be a good thing if he's doing weightlifting, or if he wants to play like a sport like football, he's got to get faster, because squatting 700 doesn't mean anything if you run a 6-second 40. It's irrelevant. So but anyway, so like knowing
some truth to that,
when to use what stimulus has been the biggest thing I feel like I've improved on in the last 2 years.
So, okay, with that being asked, we took, if you don't know, right now the creme de la creme in USA men's weightlifting is Travis's athlete Ryan Grimsland.
Right.
My question to you is this, because you see this pitfalls with a lot of coaches, especially when they're trying to mimic other people's programming.
Right.
You saw this with the Adam Archuleta DVD in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
You saw this with the Chuck Vogelpool Triple X DVD in the middle 2000s, where everybody's gobbling up these people's programs, but what they didn't understand is they're the only ones who can do it.
Right.
So when you do your athletes, how do you relate to your athletes as a coach? That because if you see a guy like Grimsland and I'm a comer up, and you'd be like, Coach, I want to train like Grimsland. He's the best in the country. Realizing that you got to say nothing against you. You're not Grimsland. We're going to get you there a different way. We're going to maximize. So, and then as Grimsland knows, just like those guys knew when they were in the weight rooms or the training halls they worked out in, he like rules the roost. Now I know what motivates him, but how do you keep him motivated in a gym where he's the alpha and there's not a lot of people that can chase?
The same way that I was motivated in that little gym in Yadkinville, because I was looking at Chuck, and I was looking at Eddie. He looks at Lou. He looks at, his goal is to beat China. So he watches their videos every single day, making sure that, and there's a guy in Indonesia that they battle. There's the big competition is the one guy in Indonesia and one dude, a dude in China, that he watches those. Same as I did. Nobody was going to beat me in Yadkinville. I love Ox, but he knows good and well he's going to beat me. So so you got to find, but when we go to camps, that's where the camps come in. And Coach, I'm not even certain that, let's say that I put Nathan beside of Ryan. I don't know that that's good for either one of them because they end up killing each other. But if once every 12 weeks they go for a week and battle it out, that's good for everyone. So I feel like this is a good mix of who we have. So
that leads me to a point. Did you ever feel when you had some dogs in there for one time? You had probably too many dogs.
Too many. Yeah.
And did you ever feel when you were, and it was like a big promotion, it was a hype show, the Max Out Fridays.
Right.
Do you think now, hindsight 2020, knowing what you know now, would you have kept those going, or would you have figured out a way to manipulate things so they didn't beat the hell out of each other up every Friday?
I would have not brought that many. I would have not brought that many A-type personalities into the same room without having an older guy lead the way. Now with Ryan, because he's very mature, you don't see him missing. If he's not going to have a good day, he's really good at auto regulation. So with him being in charge of the room, it's perfect now. Bring some in. Back then, Nathan was in charge and he was crazy.
Yeah.
So he led everyone down a bad path. But when he went to Cal Strength, he had Wes Kitts who put him in his place.
Right.
And that's what you need, that older guy. I just have way too many young guys.
They were always
a bad mistake.
Themselves. I mean, I remember seeing them guys in Waffle House.
They were so silly. They did so much bad. I mean, a lot of stuff went good. They did get stronger and they got better, but I could not control them. It was definitely a young mistake. I was a younger coach in weightlifting at the time, and so that was a bigger. I didn't know. I was glad I was beating everybody, but I could have done better with those people had I controlled that room better.
All right, so let's move into some of the VBT stuff, because again, I think what you're doing with VBT and weightlifting, I didn't think anybody would ever do, because just one, it was unheard of. Two, I still think personally, and I've talked to Brian Mann, and he's intern for me. I know Brian real well. I've talked to some other people on VBT, because I still feel like, and Brian's told me this, a lot of the data that he's put out that people try to follow is based off the power lifts.
Yeah.
And one thing I've noticed even in my own training using velocity, and we've talked about this, is I'm not sure if we need, and you could be the one leading the forefront because I know you love research, we need to start looking at peak velocities with weightlifting, because depending on an athlete's technique, that first pull is going to change the whole dynamic of average velocity.
Yeah.
Because if you're a slower puller off the ground, like for me, even on the deadlift, I'm extremely slower than even slow, because I'm so focused on, if I'm not in perfect position, I'm going to blow my damn back out again.
Me too.
And then I'm going to be a wrap. But
Right.
once I get it to the shin, I'm thinking maximum acceleration. So my peak velocity looks good. And when you see my average, you're like, God, but I know, watching weightlifters, you see different people are very deliberate in the first pull, and then they transition and go. And then you got other guys
like Grimslin or Kits.
That they're not a dip it and rip it. But so when you're doing the VBT, let's just talk about the classical Olympic lifts. Are you looking at peak, or are you trying to figure out
peak?
Yeah, so you are looking at peak.
Right. And you can't go by any standard. Here's why, is because Brian has some numbers on peak, and based on height, and you have to do that. But then again, there's more to it. Like if you teach a football player snatch, they're going to need X velocity to get that snatch. Ryan Grimslin doesn't need that much because he's very good at it. It's like, I can't throw a football like Brett Favre. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, God, he's retired. That was an old. But anyway, but like, you know what I mean? So those numbers don't apply to Grimslin, because even at 80%, he doesn't pull it as hard as he can.
Right. He understands efficient.
Right.
Where a football player, he's just ripping
it. Yeah. Sure. Right.
Well, it's funny you said that too with the height, because I remember when I was sending some data over when I was training Brian Shaw, that Brian Mann told me, man, I forgot he's 6'8". There's a formula for height when you're doing the measurements, and that changed the game a little bit. But well, I'm glad that I don't feel as stupid with the
more work needs to be done on the Olympic list. Yeah. I'll say that, and that's what I'm working on. The only thing we use it on for the Olympic list is that whatever movement they do first, whether it's snatch or whether it's clean and jerk, when they get to 80%, I have them do a hang, clean, pull. And I'll look at daily readiness. And so I have them do that 2 or 3 times, then continue their workout, because then I know, what I should do. So like if, for example, and I only look at peak on the clean pulls. And so or snatch pulls, whatever they're doing. And the reason I do hang is because I want to see the neuromuscular system. So you get that counter movement, so, and then it tells me this dude is like, I look at 0 to 5% slower than normal. It's keep going, because that's part of the game. If they're between 5 and 10% slower than normal, we're going to take the volume and intensity down 20 to 30%. If they're slower than 10% than normal, we scrap the whole thing. We'll have them do some light bodybuilding and take it to the house. And it's been awesome.
So you're using it at 80% on their progression sets.
Right.
And then when you hit that pull, you're looking at, so you're saying, when you say the hang, so you're doing a, what I call a drop and go. So you're staying up tall, and then you're getting that counter movement like they would do a vertical.
Right. Correct.
Now, just for like strength coaches, shrug pull, is that what you're considering pull, or is the elbows breaking into what we would consider like a high pull?
I want them to get as high as they can. And so
you don't, so if all you're thinking is, hey, just go for it. Right. Whatever happens at extension, it is what it is.
There's a couple of things you got to make sure of, is that you need to standardize how low they go. So we go, obviously it makes sense to go where the knee is equal to the bar is equal to the knee.
So they have to drop it to the knee.
To the knee and up. Yes. They don't have to hold it.
Yes. Snatch and clean and jerk.
Right. And so, and it just tells me daily readiness. And so we're gathering data on regular snatches and regular cleans, and I have a theory, but I'm doing I start my PhD next year. University of Auckland in New Zealand it's a hybrid program. So I got to go there every year, but most of it will be done in the United States, but it's a research-based PhD so all I'm doing is this topic we're talking about is one of the topics, is figuring out how velocity relates to weightlifting. Because right now the data is not good. It's not, and Brian knows it. It's just, it doesn't help a real weightlifter. It might help football players or or regular athletes, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
Personally, I think more needs to be done.
All right, so you brought up percentages, and this is my kind of pet peeve with those people who have jumped the velocity train.
Right.
I still believe that there's merit and there's need, and Matt Ray's told me this also. So that percentages still have to be factored in when you're
Yeah.
evaluating VBT. That these people, I think some of these, I don't want to say younger coaches, but these coaches who have dove into VBT because of people like yourself,
Right.
Mark Hoover, that's doing a great job at the high school and doing a tremendous. We have him on next month
Sweet.
talking about it, but like, because they don't hear percentages, they don't know. Like I know this, and I think Yax was one of the, I was one of the first with a couple of other coaches that had tendos in a college weight room.
Right.
That's non-debatable.
Yeah.
And we were one of the first ones to have one at almost every platform, but we didn't understand how to use it because we were just doing what we were kind of learning from Louis, and we only used it for dynamic effort. I don't even remember what year it was when people started using them for more of the sub max and max effort stuff, where to me now I'm like, some of the things that we were doing in that mid 2000s with Prilipin's chart, I was like, golly, I would love to have a VBT on some of the heavier stuff we did.
Right.
Because what I factor in is this, and this is where I think like VBT and following numbers and knowing when to cut guys off is the same thing that I see happening with GPS and player load and fatigue. Is we are at a very, to me, a very interesting time with technology and how we are trying to, hey, I want to protect these kids too, 100%. I want them safe. But we are now at this point where we're allowing technology to determine how much somebody can achieve. What I mean by that is, hey, this guy's player load's high. We got to back him off at practice. And then we want to know why he's getting hurt in the game because he hasn't prepared to play the speed and the intensity and he hasn't had enough practice volume to be successful on Saturdays or Sundays. We're in the weight room, and I know this is what's happening because I think about this a lot, how I would piggyback stuff back in the day. So I would do Prilipin's chart with our block 2 guys. We do 10 sets of doubles at 85%. But I know this, these people who are really utilizing VBT, they have this perception that, okay, this is going to look like this. And once that thing drops, cut them off.
No.
So I don't want to cut them off. I need them to finish the 10 doubles because that's going to tell me where their work capacity is when they got a 15 play drive in the game or when they're on the basketball court. So I can use that with the heavier loads to determine how well their power and their maximal strength capacities are when you have to play at high levels of sports for multiple bouts of exercise in the same time. I think we're looking at it's an interesting debate, and I don't know, and I'm not trying to say they're wrong and I'm right. I'm saying that we're seeing a lot more injuries since technology has been more involved, and we're seeing a lot more debate about how hard to push kids when we all know. And if you want to know how you all know, watch professional CrossFitters and watch professional strongman accomplish what they're doing when they're doing things that we were told the body could never be able to adapt to do. You know, as a weightlifter, no one is supposed to do 30 consecutive box jumps. No one was supposed to do a clean ladder that goes to more than 2 times your body weight on a 7-rep cluster in less than a minute. Right. So we have to be aware of that as coaches, and that's where science, technology, and the art and understanding who you're coaching has to be more synergistic. Right.
Yeah, like
we're losing. I mean, I don't watch a lot of sports as much anymore because I don't have to. I hear it every day on sports radio. How many guys are getting hurt? And you're like, how are these guys getting hurt? It doesn't make sense when you're supposed to have everything at your hands that should make it safer. Well, and I think a lot of it is I don't want to say undertrained, but underprepared maybe.
This is
So,
good. You bring up a good point. I don't
You
know.
know,
I'd
and
like
because
to see
again,
this.
like when you see this VBT, right? It's different for weightlifting. It's different for powerlifting. You go to an event, you'll get 6 plays.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
got 6 plays.
To do it.
You
Right.
go to a powerlifting event, you got 9 plays. And if you're in a big enough meet, those plays are going to be spread out.
Big time. Right. Right.
know,
No,
so-
I'm with you on this. So
You know, we hold on. I got a check break by my new I have a new producer tonight, Mindy.
oh,
Mindy, we'll go as long as we can go. I'm sorry, I should have told you that.
oh yeah. One
Oh,
thing
you're
one-
good.
Okay, because she just sent me a text, Yak. She said we got 7 minutes left, unless you go
Oh.
longer. Yeah, we kind of just go with the flow, Mindy. But thanks for checking in on us.
One thing I would say that, when I said that, we've only sent people home in 2 years twice. So like if they're 10% slower, no matter what they're doing, they should go home because and here's why, and this is conclusive. That means there's something major going on in their CNS,
But you're
Like-
doing that you're doing that in the beginning of the workout,
right?
not during the workout.
No.
So if I have no issues with that. If we're
No.
going to do a little bit of auto regulation,
Right.
I can see that. But I also know this, and this is why this is the old timer in me.
Right.
When you use these types of readiness protocols, you're not going to do that readiness program when he's at the damn world championships in 6 weeks. So
Only one I'd use it with is him. We do. And it's like we're 6 for 6 too. So I think though, if it didn't go, here's the thing. Let me clarify. So what we do is 4 days out, he takes a heavy front squat at 0.4. It's got to be above 0.4. And that tells me, is his taper going as it should? If it ever happens that it get a bad number, I won't tell him,
yeah,
So I'll just
again,
be like, I'll
you're
just
not
say
telling him.
awesome. No,
yeah, that's
no.
what I'm saying. That's where I get going. Like
because we can't do anything about it.
yeah,
We're here. We
his-
have to go.
his
Yeah.
readiness says he shouldn't practice today.
Yeah.
Well, his readiness might say he shouldn't play in the Super Bowl.
Well, he's going to play.
That's where I say we have to figure this out. Like,
Yeah.
we're relying on stuff, and again, this is where the team, the hierarchy of stuff, the horizontal leadership model with somebody sitting on top that in this day and age has to moderate this, because we've got a lot of people dictating to the people on the floor how things should be, and they don't know enough about the sport that they're evaluating.
Right. I would agree with that.
You're like, oh, this kid, this kid's coach, this kid's going to get hurt. And these are just general. This kid's going to get hurt. This kid's going to get hurt. Why? His step balance is off. He's always doing this. I said, why don't you come to practice? See that kid that you're talking about? He plays left tackle. He's
Yeah.
going to be off.
Yeah. He's going to be asymmetrical and needs to be.
Yeah, it's the way it is. So
Yes.
they have to be, everybody has to interact and has to it's a spindle.
Sure.
It's got to be intermixed. So
What do you think about the GPS then? You know how you had your boy, when you were at Carolina?
Yeah, there's
So-
a lot of, I think, again, if we were still figuring a lot out, luckily for us, Brett did a really good job of conducive and making things relatable to American football, not using rugby and soccer data. And
Right.
that's why I used to tell people, who does your GPS? I go, an American football player is doing American football play in GPS.
Sure. Right.
He understands the game, he understands the components, but I think the key factor in all of that is, and it could be an ongoing debate. Minimize your KPIs.
Right.
What do you want to know? I want to know total yardage, high speed yardage, A cell,
Yes.
D cells per position,
Boom. Yeah.
player load, whatever that looks like, and then watch how these things evolve. We try to take, when I'm asking somebody to be subjective, an athlete, like what's your RPE, right? How much reps in reserve do you have? I'll be honest with you. Kids don't know. And the younger they
no.
are,
No.
they really don't know. And then you get these, and then the older they are, if they really don't care, it could
Yeah.
be a Saturday walkthrough. What'd you
That's
get?
when the
10.
bullshit starts.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
10,
Yeah.
10, 10 or 1, 1, 1. You know, it's like, you know, and then you got guys like, hey, how come you didn't wear your GPS? Well, until you can tell me why it's going to help me score touchdowns, I'm not going to wear it. And then you finally sit down and explain to them, here's what we're measuring and here's how it could help you score touchdowns, then they'll wear it.
Yeah,
You
totally.
you have to find, and some guys are more than, you know, you've watched my guys work out. You
Yeah.
know, there was some dudes who are all in, they want to know everything. They want BBT, GPS every day after practice. And then the other dudes are like, what do you need me to do, coach? I'm going to practice and I'm going home. And that
Your boy Greg Olson, though.
yeah, he's a 24-hour guy.
That's my guy.
But I mean, it's good to know that people need to understand that percentages aren't going away.
No, I still use them, man. Like, no, like it's about teaching them intent, you know. So like when I say 75%, but at 0.57 meters per second, because then that ensures that their compensatory acceleration.
Right.
Like Fred Hatfield he hit the nail on the head, because you can do 75% 5x5, or you can do 75% 5x5 as fast as you can. Those are two totally different things. When you do the 75% as fast as you possibly can, you're going to get more motor unit recruitment and you're going to get more rate coding. Therefore, your rate of force development is better. Yes.
And you're going to recover faster. Yeah, I always said, reading Fred Hatfield stuff and then learning Louis, that what Louis did, and again, he'll tell you, he found out from bands from Dave Williams and Gillespie when they were at Liberty, and the chains, I forgot where the chains came from, but what that accommodating resistance really did was even give more merit to the compensatory acceleration training that Hatfield said, because like you were talking about earlier, that allowed you to stay in acceleration longer.
Right.
The lighter the load, the sooner you got to decelerate on the standard power lifts. And that's where you really were able to make those bigger difference in acceleration, especially like you said with the bands.
The bands are the
maximum concentric acceleration was critical with bands, because it would staple you.
It would
You can fight the chain because it's dead weight, but you couldn't play with the band.
Outrun it, as we would say, but like it just increases the velocity eccentrically, which then for the muscle spindles and all those things they're there to like stop eccentric the contraction. They all give you passive force production. So like, you know, like we've all heard about like the muscle length tension relationship. Like when you go all the way down in the bottom of the squat, your muscle has the least ability to contract, because the myosin and actin they can't even reach each other at that point. However, you can also produce your maximum amount of force because of the passive force production that you're able to have. So like the bands, I'm pretty convinced, this is a bold statement because it's not conclusive yet, but I'm pretty convinced that a weightlifter or even I would go as far as to say a football player, anybody that needs to be like maximum speed and power, I don't think that they should ever squat without bands after, say, 5 years. Once they've got 5 years of great strength training in, I don't think you'll ever see Grimslin do a pure squat ever again. Now, we'll continue to get stronger, but with the band, because the band relates more to weightlifting than straight weight.
Well, it's interesting you say bands, because that's going to be one of the questions that relates to that. But I'll also tell you another thing that I thought, where I saw bands really help, that was with my upper guys when we would do bands, like when my block 4, my block 3 guys, and even my son, because he was younger, but he was already at that training age, where we would go off the script, kind of like the Chuck Vogelpool method, where we'd do 6 doubles of squats with a band and then take the bands up and go for singles, and dudes would get crazy PRs.
That was my bread and butter.
Yeah, my son's Joe's first 140 kilogram front squat was after doing 6 doubles at 60% with I think he had a light band at that time. He did 6 doubles on the minute, and then we chipped up and he crushed.
I have no doubt. That was my bread and butter. Like he's like working up with a band, taking it off, keep going, PR.
Yeah, that was some good stuff. All right, so we're rolling pretty good. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 questions for you, and if I need to chime in, or I will, but here's the first one. First one, in-season velocity-based training. This is for D1 basketball players.
Great. This is going to be good.
Okay. What is your recommendations of how do you maintain the gains that you accomplish in the developmental stages? I'm not going to say off season, during the season with as little recovery as possible.
I would pick either one of 2 things. There's 2 methods I would use. And I got this from you. You know how you used to tell me that you would they would set PRs even in you guys would go into the not off season, but the bowl prep, and that you would have them do that chain thing, and you would continue setting records. So I would choose one of 2 things. I would either pick a weight. Let's say that whatever their 82 or 85% is, whatever it is, you either have that as standard. Let's say that it's 200 pounds, just to be easy, and I would make sure that every 6 weeks I'm retesting that same exact weight, and I'm either maintaining or increasing velocity. So I don't have to max my 1RM, but if that is staying stable, I'm good. I have the ability now to do a max. I'd probably, if I'm powerlifting, I need a few weeks, but I have that ability, and I know that. Or the 2 would be pick a velocity and test on that. So I use 0.4. It's a very safe one. I've found 0.4 is normally about 87%. You can go.
Are you just doing that for 1 rep?
Yep, 1 rep.
Just working out for 1 rep.
Right. It's a way of testing without putting them at risk. You can't take an NFL football player, obviously, and try to do a true 1RM, in the middle of their season. But I can go to 1RM at 0.4, 0.45 meters per second. I can do that safely, and I can see if what I'm doing is keeping them where they need to be. And so that's what I would do. And I would use bands completely, personally, in season, just because, as you said, you use chains a lot because it deloads when they're in maximum range of motion, when they're in the most vulnerable, you're deloading for them. So I would do exactly what you did, back then. I think that was brilliant. And so it's
you
basically
brought up about you
do.
would use bands during the season. And for me, I didn't like doing bands because our guys were so neurally taxed at the NFL level.
I can see that.
Now, very rarely would I pull them out. We did mostly chain work, but with your younger kids, maybe you can do it a little bit more. But I was always kind of concerned, 1,
smart
safety.
Right.
So it's a different ball game with the bands. And 2 was I didn't want to fry those guys.
Totally. And it will, just because anytime that you speed up the eccentric contraction, it's going to cause more muscle damage. So yeah, chains would make more sense.
And the other part for me was, if a guy, again, this was before we were just figuring out really deep in the auto regulation is, and here's the other problem. If you don't have your mind right for bands, and now it becomes more of an effort lift.
Yeah.
Now it's
ruined. I think you're SOL. I agree with you.
Yeah. So you got to be you have to know the training age, and you have to know that you're really dialed in with that type of athlete. But even at the college level during the season, primarily stuck with the chains until we had a little bit of a break, like in the college system, and Yax knows, and Chad, that you go to a bowl, depending on where you finish the year, you go to a better bowl. It's usually later in the cycle. You may have 4 weeks of almost another developmental or winter program. And that's where we were doing we were doing testing during that 4 weeks. And we were just kill. I was like, oh man, I figured this in season out. So that leads to number 2, varying the intensity during in-season lifts. And we kind of talked a little bit what your thoughts were with velocity and a percentage. And how would you progress that start to finish? And we already talked about our bands and chains necessary.
Personally, so with football, it's complex. Obviously, if you have a team that has a good chance of making, the playoffs, like NFL, then you got playing differently. So you got to know who you have. You got to be honest with yourself. But let's just say that you have a full season, a few weeks, and a bowl game. What I would do is I would personally, I would peak my absolute strength like probably before the season starts. And then I would try to like, start peaking, like strength speed at the most, accelerated strength. Like, let me be more clear. So with strength speed is normally around 60 to, let's see, 80%, right?
Yeah,
I think it
something like
is.
that.
And then you got accelerated strength after that. So I would keep it, in that range. I would stay 60%. There's a lot of good studies that would tell you that if you spend a lot of your quality reps at 60%, you will increase your ability to produce power. And here's a better thing for all you football coaches, is that you will be able to do it at a higher rate. So there's Brian, he referenced a really good study this weekend that you can get increases in power, maybe even a little bit better by spending your time at 80 to 100%, going super heavy, However, the speed to that peak power goes down. And so like that does nothing for anybody that's that sprinting is important or football, basically. So I would spend most of my time between 60 to 80%. That would be my window in season, period.
So yeah, for me, I'll just piggyback on that. So we didn't use chains or bands with any, and this is professional level. And also, I shouldn't say that. We never used, well, in the pros, we didn't do chains or bands on upper body at all. We did 3-week, 4-week waves of different log bar heights with our bigs. And then we would just go dumbbells. We did dumbbell, more of a volume type stuff with the skilled guys, but every 3 or 4 weeks, we'd work up to like 91% of their upper body stuff for 1 to 3 reps. With the lower body, we trained it almost more like a sprinter effect. We stayed dynamic effort the whole year.
Right.
Redid some chain work, did a bunch of chain work with our squats. And what we found was, like I said, and I knew it would work because we did the work during my college years, but the year we went to the Super Bowl, I'd say 90% or more of the athletes who did a front squat during the end season with the chain weight at the top was anywhere between 91 and over 100% of their off-season training max.
Right. That's what you told. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's where we knew we were in really good shape that year. Well, we also went 15-1 and nobody's hurt, and it always works that way when you're winning. When you're losing, everybody doesn't want to squat. So that was obviously the best in season we had, and obviously it was our best year we had. So
because even if you're 91% at the top, you're probably still going to be in that area that between 60 and 80%.
Yeah, it is, because generally we never went more than 64% of the bar weight.
Straight away. Sweet.
Yeah,
Smart.
with 180 pounds of chain, and then you do the math, and it's up there for some guys.
Yeah, it's brilliant. See that?
It was some good stuff. All right, here's a good one for you. 1 to 2 things that each person could learn. What could a weightlifting coach learn from a sport strength and conditioning coach to help them improve? And then what could a strength and conditioning coach learn from a weightlifting coach?
The weightlifting coach could definitely learn from strength and conditioning coaches to look at things holistically. Like, that's not just about, technique, and that you have to consider multiple factors. You need to look at things from, where is somebody asymmetrical, like looking at who needs what accessory movements. Like, strength and conditioning coaches just very, like, their base of knowledge is like way bigger than most weightlifting coaches, which has been my advantage coming from your world. But the thing that, a strength and conditioning coach could learn from a weightlifting coach is understanding movement just a bit better. It's like a weightlifting coach, even the worst of them are really, really good at movement. They understand the movement, even if squat, Don, you remember Don McCauley, my mentor.
He coached me. I was the worst lifter in the gym. He spent more time with me. You had 8-year-old girls beating me. I was the laughing stock when I walked in.
His ability to understand movement is still yet to date better than anyone I've ever seen, including myself. And so that would be the 2 for sure. Way more than all weightlifting coaches coach, like way more. They just know thing.
Yeah, but I mean, here's the thing is, and I give credit to Mike Conroy because he taught me how to Olympic lift when I was working for Ron Thompson at Boise State. That, Mike, because remember back in those days, and we've had this discussion before, it's like if you didn't do the Olympic lifts to do explosive power, you were a fool and whoop, 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 whoop. But then Mike is one of the, at that time, and still is, but at one of that time, he was one of the top weightlifting coaches in the United States. And he looked
Right.
me dead in the eye and go, hey, just remember, you're not training weightlifters.
Right.
And you can get away with just shrug pulls. And
Right.
this is in 1991 and 1992, when that was like, one, it was taboo to say that. Then it was even double taboo that a weightlifting coach would tell you that.
Yeah. I would
And-
agree with him. 100%.
Yeah. So Mike really was key to me, because when I went, and Yachts knows, because Yachts helped me get there, but I was like super green with weightlifting, because when I was in college, I got coached by an HIT guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I walk out and I start powerlifting, man. My Olympic lifting knowledge when I was looking for a GA was negligible, to say the least. And, we had hang cleans written down in my program in college, but I guarantee you I did hang cleans maybe 5 times my entire career. And then we had
Right.
to start doing split jerks, and we were taught to split jerk by remember the Superstars, when they used to have that event, the Superstars on ABC, and the athletes would do split jerks? That's what we were told. Watch Superstars, and that's how
What
you do a split jerk.
Superstars?
And I love my strength coach, but because he was an HIT guy getting forced to do Olympic lifts by the football coaches, you know how that goes.
Yeah.
That's-
Not good. Not
Yeah.
good.
So, yeah, I think that, weightlifting coaches are, and just like here, I say the same thing. I don't think enough strength coaches spend enough time with professional powerlifters to learn how to do those lifts right either.
Right.
I've said that all the time when I went to Dave Tate and Jim Wendler were running the Elite West Side seminars. And, here we are. And I still say one of the first things that any strength and conditioning coach should do is get USA certified level 1. And you can get that before you graduate and take the CSCS or any other
Right.
certification. But I also say get in front of some professional lifters that can teach you some
Yeah.
intricacies about squatting and benching. Because I tell people all the time, I'm not a professional lifting coach. I'm a professional sporting coach.
Right.
And I'm highly efficient and competent in teaching all those lifts, even to a point when I'm working with, like what I learned this year with strongman or a power lifter or a weightlifter or anybody like that. I can only take you so far before you got to go find you an elite level coach when it comes to the strength disciplines.
But it's because you're smart, though. So I would piggyback on that and say that you hit the nail on the head, man. A lot of coaches, a lot of strength coaches, they'll go to a West Side Barbell, elite, and and they're like, oh, I want to implement that. Or they'll see like Swiss, and they'll hear me talk about weightlifting, and I want to implement that. But all those advantages that we talk about, that all the things that your athletes can gain from doing those movements, will not happen unless you teach them the way that we teach. So like the worst is like, don't teach the Olympic lifts unless you really know how to teach them, because you won't be doing any of the things we're talking about. Because if you don't understand movement, you're going to put them at risk. You're going to put too much emphasis on their back, and the bar is going to be too far in front of them, which is going to be too slow. Like, we're fast because we do it correctly. The bar stays
no
close
question.
to us and the velocity is high. But if you just like pull it as hard as you can, none of those things I'm talking about happen. So,
Well, and it's funny you
movement
say that,
sport.
because when you come to our world and you're talking about lifting for competency rather than lifting for competition, this is one of my little, I want to say pet peeves, but one of my caution flags for those who think velocity is the cure all end all. And I think some of you on here will agree. What I've seen with utilizing velocity based training with athletes, sporting
Right.
athletes, not strength
Right.
discipline athletes, is it will clean up the exercise technique of your Olympic lifts, but it will deteriorate the exercise technique of your squats and benches, because
If you let
especially
it.
in dynamic effort,
Right.
especially
If
in
you-
dynamic effort.
if you let that.
Yeah.
But
Because
like it doesn't count for us if you do it.
Yeah, because
sloppy.
for us, they're chasing this, because we've told them, you got to get to 0.6, or you got to get to 0.7, and they're chasing numbers, and all of a sudden you got catapult bench presses and guys coming in with black and blue marks on their ribs. You got dudes,
Standards.
if you're using a box, you got guys bouncing off a solid platform box, and it's like,
That is crap. Yeah.
or they're cutting it slack, or they're not pausing. So you just got to
Yeah.
be, and again, you're right. That's blamed on the coach. Like,
Yeah.
you got to stop that in the bud, because
Right.
like we've talked about, too many coaches implement all these movements and don't know how to teach it.
Right.
Then they post these things on the internet and the kid gets crushed, but he's only doing what the coach allowed him to do.
I never crush a kid, but I will crush a coach. If I see something that's putting a kid at danger, like, absolutely. Like, but it's only happened to me once ever, where I saw a kid almost get killed and like the coaches are like laughing. Then that makes me upset. But yeah.
Oh, all right. So here's our last question. This is about post-activation potentiation.
Yes.
He says he finds it helpful in the perception of bar weight, but then he's talking about like you're doing like a lower body to lower body potentiation, upper body to upper body separately. But he said he's also seen some benefit by doing a lower body movement followed by an upper body movement, or vice versa. So his question specifically to you is, have you done this type of potentiation? And then what are some of your protocols?
I mean, we've definitely done, like, as weightlifters, like we're lifting for the sport of weightlifting. So, we don't have necessarily, body parts. We do have days where they're more emphasis, but so we've definitely done like, cleans and maybe a squat before a press, but I haven't noticed any kind of carryover. But of course I haven't tested it or even thought about that, like I would be lying to say I know something. So, but it's interesting. I might try it, but I can't see why that would work, because normally potentiation is very specific. So like, even if I do some people will go do a squat or a clean and then go sprint, but it's got to be somewhat specific, meaning the same hinging in the same knee extension, knee flex has to be there. So like, but I don't know, man, like potentiation still needs a lot of like, I use it a lot, but there's not near enough research to be able for anyone to say anything conclusive. So if anyone says anything conclusive about that, they're lying. There's no research that would agree with them.
Well, and it's funny too, because you look at certain things like what's potentiation, right? There's, the ones we're talking about, then, but then you study Matt Wenning in the Wenning warmups, that's high volume work. He's doing 300 reps of work before he goes to a max effort or a dynamic effort day, and he's getting the same types of benefits.
Yeah. Right.
And I've seen that in my own training, even building out really specific stuff in my readiness that helps me focus on my compensation issues.
Yeah, potentiation is so broad, man. It's like there's so many ways you can use it.
Well, what was it? And what didn't Galpin, there was a study, and I can't remember it, but he changed the term from post-activation potentiation to something
post-tectonic.
Something with performance like almost performance enhancement potentiation or something to that. I've got it somewhere, but I know Galpin was the first time I saw it. He had mentioned it, and then there was a specific paper, I think, that went with it.
Well, the terms get mixed up because a lot of people, like, you can go into some exercise science labs and they will use like electric stim to potentiate, so they'll use like, a lot of times Charles Polick and the stuff that you read, that's what he's talking about. So like, he's talking like what you're talking about. Winning is very much so. It's a performance. It's you're activating, the systems that are going to be at play of what they're about to do. But like, but then there's the whole like, have something heavier than you're about to do. There's that one. Then there's that, something to heavy to excite something fast. So that's the do a squat, then a run. There's a lot of research, and like I've got a lot of data on it, and it works like Ryan Grimslin. It's just like me. It works like it's like a drug. It works so well. The very same person.
You say that. Yeah, you said that too, because I think Yox might know this, and probably Big Ed, but I know a lot of guys when they do combine prep for 225, they'll warm guys up to 275 and then go down to 225 to hit it. I never did that, especially during pro days. I had them do 6 sets of doubles with bands and then do 185 for 3. And then they were ready to just destroy
bands.
225 bench.
Bands, I don't know. Like, I'm sorry. What's that dude? Bill You just said his name, that Liberty. Gosh,
Yeah, Bill Gillespie.
yeah, he's got a lot of cool theories on the bench press thing. But by the way, for everyone on here, the guy who did the most reps ever in the NFL Combine is my dude. For running backs, Tommy Bohannon.
Well, Tommy
the way.
was a freak. He's cleaning 440 his 5th year in the NFL. Nobody
He's a complete freak. He's a complete
in his garage off blocks.
That's still my boy. Now he's a financial planner, so he's like
I know.
the
I
strongest
saw him at
financial planner.
I saw him at a weight game.
He's the best, dude.
Okay, before we wrap it up, my buddy Yusef hit a couple of quotes that I wanted to read out to y'all because I think they fit real well into today's discussion. We had to add to Coach Kenn. Here's 2 quotes that come to mind. Not all things that are measured need to be counted, and vice versa. And then quality can describe quantity, but quantity cannot describe quality. Pretty.
I'm gonna have to think on that. Like, yeah, I'd like to see that. Yeah. Is he here? I'd like for him to like talk about that more. I'd like,
Yusef,
clarify that.
He's the system guy. See him down there, the system?
I see him.
Yusef, jump on. Yusef worked with Charlie Francis back in the day.
Huge
and
fan.
I've known him since, 1994 or 5 when I first started posting some tier system stuff. He called me at Boise back when you had to call people. Then he said, perhaps chasing numbers will only allow injuries to chase you.
Yeah, I agree. That's straightforward. I agree. Like that's why we put limits. I do believe that the stuff that we do in weightlifting definitely pertains to football more than like powerlifting. Here's why. It's because like we're trying to get strong to be very powerful and fast. And so like, once you take powerlifting too far, it's quite, like now you're really good at the force, but it's really slow at being able to produce it, because to be a world-class powerlifter, like I finally become, you're going to move squats at like 0.1 meters per second. And so those adaptations are awesome, but not so much for football. So like, I definitely feel like I learned more in weightlifting. Well, the 2 combined has been a big help, but like the way I coach my weightlifters, it would be similar to that I would do to football ish.
Cool.
But
well,
definitely
that's gonna
bands,
wrap it up. Yeah, you love those bands.
I do love bands. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because your guys you guys go in the weight room, that's your practice. Your guys aren't going out for 2 hours after that, getting their heads smashed.
Sure.
Stupid coaches running them up hills after practice for conditioning, and
we don't get tested on squats. So I don't really care about setting any world record squats, but world record snatches, I'm about that.
Yeah, I hear that. And hopefully in a few weeks you get some more medals around your guys' neck.
About to find out. Right.
But hey, that wraps up November's session. We really appreciate Travis coming on December 7th. We'll have Mark Hoover from York Comprehensive High School. It was, again, it's a good piggyback. I kind of chose that because he does a lot of VBT at the high school level, and a tremendous, man, the guy must never sleep the amount of data that he collects with.
He's smart.
Yeah, he's got it going on. I got to visit him and watch how he runs his day.
I want to come to that one and just listen.
Yeah, he's going to put some good stuff together. He's putting a lot of good stuff out for the high school coaches. But again, thanks to Mindy Fox, my new producer for the week. Hopefully she's all the time, but I think we hired somebody that's going to start jumping on with this. And then to Kurt and Tammy for allowing us to put this show on every month, and for helping sponsor Travis. And to all the dynamic team members who jump on, man, I appreciate you all. And we will see you all next month, December 7th. Travis, you got a final thought?
Yeah, will you send me, I want Ox and Ed's, you send me their sales?
You want to put them on your podcast.
My podcast.
You want this is how it works, man. The reciprocation.
Right.
People will stop listening if I get on there.
No, dude, you're awesome.
He's got a lot of people going on. Yeah, I'll get you that stuff tomorrow, Travis.
Thank you. All right.
All right, we'll see you all again. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll talk to y'all later. Bye.
Bye-bye.